Fall is my favorite time of year for a variety of reasons, and making apple cider definitely comes in near the top of that list. There are many ways to go about making cider, some more complex than others, but today I'm just going to run you through how I like to do it. Feel free to share your favorite methods in the comments. The first few minutes here are a mix of clips illustrating our process on cider pressing day. For a couple of days each fall, I get together with a small group of friends and family to enjoy food, beverages, and to press some apples. So first, I should specify that in the United States, cider generally refers to unfiltered apple juice, while the fermented form is often referred to as hard cider. Outside of the US and Canada, I believe that the fermented beverage is more commonly referred to as cider, and its unfermented version, juice. For the purposes of this video, I will refer to the pre-ferment as juice and the fermented beverage as cider. Today we'll be looking at how to make both, from the beginning to the end of the process. But for anyone just wanting to ferment their own cider, I should mention that you don't have to press your own apples. You can buy juice at the store. But make sure to buy natural or unfiltered juice that is preservative free. You don't want juice that contains things like sodium benzoate or potassium sorbate, as they will inhibit fermentation. Also, feel free to skip ahead if you just want to see the fermentation. The process is very straightforward, and I'll outline the key points. Your apples need to be cut or shredded fairly well prior to pressing. The more thoroughly this is done, the greater the juice yield you will have. After shredding or cutting the apples, you need to press them to release the juice, and there needs to be some sort of containment or straining method incorporated, which will keep the larger solids out of your juice. As you can see, we have an entirely homemade setup that is fairly small. There are many pre-made presses and shredders out there, but I won't comment on them, as my experience with them is limited. Our setup works well, and it's dead simple. We shred apples using a propeller-like tool consisting of a flat piece of steel, welded to a steel rod and sharpened like a lawnmower blade. We use a stainless steel bucket to hold the apples while running the cutter with a drill. The wood lid, which is just a few boards screwed together, with a hole in the center, serves not only to keep the apples in the bucket, but also to keep the cutter centered in the bucket. Our press is made from oak boards and powered by an inexpensive bottle jack from Harbor Freight. When the apples are thoroughly cut up, we transfer them into a game bag. These are large bags used to pack meat out of remote hunting locations. They're like a very heavy-duty cheesecloth, and they work great for capturing your apple solids. Their durability means you can also wash them and reuse them later. Inevitably, you end up with some debris and maybe a hornet or two in the juice, so we strain once more through the game bags before bottling. For storage, we save jugs and bottles throughout the year to keep the cider in, rinsing them with Star San before filling. More on that later. The filled jugs of juice are easy to freeze and keep year-round this way. Now we'll look at how to make the fermented beverage, cider, or hard cider. Everyone who has done fermenting before will have their own ideas on this process. I'm going to share what has worked well for me and provided easily repeatable success. An important part of achieving that consistency is properly sanitizing all vessels and tools that will contact the cider. The main point here is to eliminate unintended bacteria or other microorganisms that aren't desired in your ferment. In this video, I'm using a product called Star San, and I highly recommend it. It makes this part dead simple, and it's very purpose specific. It's food safe, and a bottle will last you quite a while doing small batch fermentation. To use it, you dilute it in water following the ratio on the bottle. I always eyeball it, as an exact measurement isn't critical, but you wouldn't want to use less than recommended, as that could prove less effective in sanitizing. After that, you simply rinse all vessels and tools in the mixture. You can let them drip dry, but just know that the sanitizer mix won't hurt you or your ferment. It's perfectly fine to have a little liquid or some bubbles left over after the rinse. Now you'll see I have a handful of items here that I'm rinsing in preparation. I'll link to the process-specific ones in the video description, and I'll highlight the usefulness of each as we go. That way you can decide what you want to use. If you do make a purchase from any of the links, I just want to clarify that some of them will help the channel at no additional cost to you, so thank you for the support if you choose to. First, I'm taking a measurement with a hydrometer in order to get a specific gravity reading. These readings should be taken multiple times throughout the process, and there are two main purposes behind them. First, if you want to know the finished ABV or alcohol by volume of your beverage, having a reading at the beginning and end can help you determine that. You'll need to do a bit of math though. Second, having these readings can be helpful in determining that your ferment is complete, or in other words, that your yeast has converted all of the available sugars. At the very least, I recommend taking two readings, 1 week apart, when you believe that the fermentation is done. Finding the same reading each time helps verify that the process is complete. If your reading changes, repeat the process until they are the same. Be warned though, if you skip checking your ferment with your hydrometer to ensure that it is finished, you can accidentally leave unfermented sugars that would have the potential to create excess pressure if bottled. It's also worth noting that you are most likely to run into a slow or suspended fermentation if you're working in a very cool temperature. Keeping the temp between 60 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit is less likely to produce that scenario. Hydrometer use isn't complicated, but if you're looking for instruction, I recommend doing a quick search on YouTube for a how-to. Now to kick off fermentation. As with anything, there are many ways to go about this, but let's keep it simple. First, add your juice to the sanitized carboy or alternative fermentation vessel. Keep in mind that you want headspace or an air gap at the top of your fermentation vessel. The goal is to fill your container close to 80% with juice. As the fermentation process takes place, that gap is filled with CO2 and sometimes foam. Too little headspace and it could foam right out of the airlock. Too much headspace is not a concern at first as the CO2 fills it, but it can be an issue later when fermentation stops. Put simply, the less air that contacts your ferment, the better. Now is the time to add yeast or cap the carboy with an airlock if you intend to utilize wild yeasts that were already present in the apples. There are many yeast varieties out there and any of them will cause fermentation to occur. This video won't dive into the details of that topic, but if you want a safe bet that's commonly used, Safe Ale SO4 works great. The recommended amount per gallon is 0.06 to 0.11 ounces. Aiming for the higher end of the recommended quantity, I added roughly 0.11 ounces. You could also convert the net weight of the package to ounces and eyeball the amount from there. Feel free to do your own research here if you'd like to understand more about yeast. As with the sanitizer, follow the recommended dosage on the packet. Using a little extra won't hurt, but using too little could potentially result in a slow, stalled, or less than complete fermentation. And again, going over the amount a bit isn't detrimental. The yeast can then be poured directly into your juice. It will tend to float at first, so I just give it a little gentle swish, get it mixed in. I highly recommend keeping your juice capped in between these first steps, as one of your biggest enemies comes in the form of external bacteria, and those bacteria can be introduced in many ways, but a common one is from fruit flies. Not only are they drawn to the juice, but they can defeat all your work of sanitation by transferring acetic acid bacteria into your fermentation vessel, possibly helping you make apple cider vinegar instead of cider. Now you want to fill the airlock with a liquid that won't allow the passage of bacteria back into the vessel. You can use hard liquor or just use the same sanitizer dilution from earlier. For those new to this, an airlock keeps outside air from entering the vessel, while allowing the excess CO2 created by fermentation to be vented out. There are different varieties of airlocks, and I'll link a couple of them in the description. Finally, place the bung or rubber stopper in the carboy and insert the filled airlock. And now it's just a waiting game. I highly recommend keeping your cider in a dark, cool place. Too cold can stunt fermentation, so I don't necessarily recommend a fridge. Too hot can create an overactive fermentation, possibly causing off flavors and a big mess, with the potential for foam pushing out of your airlock and all over the place. I keep mine in a spare closet or room between 60 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit, which has yielded consistent results with no mess. If you do end up with an overactive fermentation, you can use a blow-off tube, which is just a hose in place of the airlock that is fed into a bucket or container of sanitizer. This functions like a giant airlock, but keeps the mess at a minimum and can eliminate the risk of your airlock running dry and allowing bacteria to enter. And on that note, make sure your airlock never does run dry. Simply top it up anytime it's looking a little low. You can see that in the first couple days of fermentation, I already have a bit of activity at the airlock. Those bubbles mean that the yeast is working and CO2 is being produced. As your fermentation progresses, you will see sediment settling in the bottom of your container. This is totally normal and nothing to be concerned about. Fermentation times vary due to many different conditions. I found that natural yeast ferments sometimes start slower, but most of my ciders are finished in fermentation after about 2 to 4 weeks. At that point, there is no longer visible bubbling or any airlock activity. Some of you may be interested in adding other flavors to your cider, and you can pretty much use anything you like to. It's fun to experiment. I'm going to share a spice cider that we often simmer on the stovetop in the cold months of the year. Even the juice version will make a house smell heavenly, and both are made with the same ingredient ratios. To 1 gallon of juice, add 1 teaspoon of whole cloves, 3 cinnamon sticks, 3 star anise pericarps, and a few slices of ginger root. I let the cider go completely untouched for 7 months, only topping up the airlock when necessary. It turned out with an incredible flavor. Really well-balanced spices, and a subtle apple taste. I bottled it straight from the initial fermentation vessel. Some people like separating the cider from the sediment, but I personally haven't found a good reason to. You'll also hear about aging in the carboy versus aging in the bottle, and that is also a personal preference. Experiment and do what suits you. Here are 2 more ciders. One is a natural ferment and the other utilized the SO4 yeast. Both are tasty. SO4 is just more predictable as you know exactly what strain of yeast is largely at work, and therefore the final flavors you're most likely to produce. Just like everything else in the process, there are many ways to proceed with bottling. I use flip-top bottles, and I don't sweeten, but I do carbonate with sugar. Basically, unless you neutralize the yeast with heat or chemicals, it will begin working again on any fermentable sugar that you add. Because overcarbonation can cause bottle bombs, my recommendation is to calculate and measure your sugar. Even if you don't add enough sugar to create much carbonation, having the layer of CO2 that this bottle fermentation creates protects your cider from oxygen contact. And what you see me doing here is purely for example. You should calculate and measure your own based on your beverage and what sugar you use. I'll link a calculator in the video description for this purpose. Again, your situation will be different than mine, so make sure to do your own calculations and measuring. This tool, called an auto siphon, is purpose-built for siphoning your beverage from one container to another, and it is especially useful for minimizing sediment transfer and oxygen contact. It is linked in the description. The process I'm following involves dissolving a fermentable sugar in hot water. You should have already checked to be sure that your fermentation is complete by taking 2 hydrometer readings 1 week apart and finding no change in the reading. Before bottling is also the time to record your final reading for determining alcohol content if that's of interest to you. Keep in mind, just like when we started, you need to sanitize everything that contacts your cider or you risk contamination. This is true for all tools and vessels in each step. Once fully dissolved, I transfer the sugar water to a pitcher. The pitcher is then placed at a level below the level of the carboy. When siphoning, you want the empty container set lower in this fashion to assist in the flow of liquid. The lower the better, but I prefer to stay off the floor. I highly recommend securing your hose to the pitcher as you don't want it flipping out while you're filling. I just use a chip clip. Now, with everything in place, I work the pump a couple of times until the cider is flowing under its own steam. Once the transfer is complete, I give it a gentle stir just to make sure the sugar is well distributed. Don't overdo it or stir too vigorously, as this introduces more oxygen to the cider and we don't want that. And finally, it's bottling time. This is a bottling wand and it can be attached to your siphon hose to aid in filling the bottles. Trust me, it's worth having. And just like everything else, including these bottles, it was sanitized before use. To demonstrate the function of the bottling wand, take a quick look at the black tip in the bottom of the bottle. You'll see that there's a spring valve which is open when pressed against the bottom of the bottle. Let's put it to use. You need to give it a few pumps to get the siphon going while simultaneously holding down the tip of the bottling wand. And once it starts flowing, simply go from one bottle to the next, filling them with only a small gap or very little headspace remaining. And then I just gently pour the remainder, which the auto siphon couldn't reach. I'll be doing another fermentation video that is also a 2-part process of first preparing the non-fermented liquid and then making alcohol with it afterwards. If you have a guess what it might be, please drop a comment down below to let me know. For those interested in my church warden pipes, I currently have a big project in the works that I'm hoping to share in the coming months. And as I'm sure is pretty apparent from my long intervals between videos, I have a ton of irons in the fire and my day job takes a lot of time and energy. But I'm continuing to create things and film content when I can, and I greatly appreciate all of your support through watching, sharing, and commenting. Thank you guys so much.